between, I mean, Iggy Pop was, you know, a big thing for you, wasn't it? And the Kreuzberg, was that a connection?
Not really, no, it was way before then. I had a really interesting older brother, and we lived in a mining community in Scotland. My dad was a miner, and my mum worked in the docks, so it was classic blue-collar working class. And my brother was a crazy guy. I mean, considering it was a fairly alpha male, tough neighbourhood, these guys worked, you know, on ships and down the mines. They were tough guys. My brother was a Hare Krishna monk in that environment, really strange. And he listened to crazy music. So the music that my friends were listening to, Slade or you know, maybe even worse, Gary Glitter, and I was listening to Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa, but most importantly was this album he got for me called Raw Power by Iggy Pop, and I just loved it so much. And then I started to see pictures of him performing and things, and I just realised he was for me, you know, he was my guy. So really before punk rock happened, everything was in place, really. You know, this kind of idea that these, you know, somewhat rebellious and non-establishment people could be in a rock and roll band in a really cool way. Because I hated all these other rock bands like The Who and Zeppelin, all the British rock bands. I really didn't like that music at all. And in those days you could identify the enemy by, it was very tribal. So if somebody was walking down the street with a Genesis album or a Yes album, they were the enemy. You know, you knew immediately just because of the album sleeves. Whereas if you saw somebody walking down the street with an MC5 album or Iggy album, or maybe even David Bowie, you kind of gravitated more towards them. But I was very lucky having an older brother who was really switched on to really great stuff. But he bought me, the first album I bought, I can't quite remember. I know the first single I bought was Jeekster by T-Rex. I can't really remember the first album. It might have been Hunky Dory, but certainly he bought me Raw Power, and it was a life-changing moment. My father wasn't very pleased when I walked in the house with a New York Dolls album. He said, "What the fuck is that? And who the fuck are they?" And I went, "This is the New York Dolls, Dad." He said, "These are incredible guys." He said, "Really?" So he wasn't, you know, he was a bit suspicious of where my taste was headed. But when I became a punk, I got kicked out of school and got chucked into this, what we've now called sixth form college, and didn't do very well there either. I wasn't interested. But I got a job in a factory, earning a few quid, and you know, I started to have a look by then, and develop a look. This was just at the time when punk rock had happened in the summer of '76 in the UK at least, and I was ready. You know, you're just ready for something. It made sense to me. I remember telling my mum with the Skids got voted best punk band in Scotland, and because she didn't really like the idea I was in this punk rock group. I mean, I'm luckily in Scottish terms, I'm from a mixed, it's very sectarian in Scotland. I have a Catholic mother and a Protestant father, so I kind of lay in the middle of that madness that they have in Scotland. But she was quite religious, and she was quite shocked when she saw me with black hair with a big white stripe down the front of it. And I said, "But listen, we've just been voted best punk band in Scotland." And she said, "That's fine, but you're the only punk band in Scotland." Which was kind of true.
One of the funniest dog in Iceland. Yeah, brilliant. I was going to, my first question was actually going to be fast forwarding quite a bit. Is that when I was reading your Into the Valley autobiography, something I didn't know is probably the first time a lot of us saw Richard was on our television screens when the Skids played Into the Valley on Top of the Pops. And with your unique style of dancing. And
dancing, you call it dancing.
Moving. But this nearly didn't happen, did it? And it relates to something you touched upon a little bit earlier about the medical condition that you had from a very young age.
Yeah, I've helped. I'm epileptic, so I was going through a really bad. I go through different periods of it where I'm kind of okay and then I'm really bad. And unfortunately for me and for the band, I was going through a very, very bad period at the time, and we're about to do the rehearsal for Top of the Pops, and I had a massive seizure in the dressing room in the BBC. So Stuart Adamson said to them, well, we can't do it, you know. But the pluggers, the people who got you on the show from Virgin, our record label, were, no, you have to do this, because it's such a big deal, you know, 20 million people watch that programme. And I said, well, we can't do it. He said, we can't do it, the guy's really ill. He was very protective of me, actually, when we were young, because he was a bit older, obviously. But I said, let's just do it. We weren't able to rehearse, and when we got to the performance time, he just said, just go for it. Whatever happens, happens, just go for it. And I did, and that's where that, as you called it, dancing, I wouldn't call it that, but that's where that thing happened. And it was really due to the fact that we couldn't rehearse, and the camera angles, if you really revisit it, are all over the place, because they didn't know what was going to happen, because we hadn't rehearsed it. And it was an amazing thing. I remember coming off stage afterwards, and Deanna Ross was pre-recording something for the following week, and she came up to me and went, hey baby, that was cool. And I've got to say, there's been many occasions when I've been in a hotel room on my own and I've remembered Diana Ross speaking to me in a Scottish accent.
And did it result in a chain reaction, or?
Oh, you're supreme.
Yeah. So, the Skids had got together. There's this incredible cohesion of talent, and you did some amazing things. I know you'd seen the White Riot, but you also opened for the Clash, didn't you? Is it the Kinema?
That's right. Yeah.
In Edinburgh.
Yeah, I think we were lucky in the beginning in Scotland, because we were really one of the few bands available, so we got all the gigs. So when the Dam came, we got to play with them, and the Buzzcocks came, we got those gigs. So we were very fortunate. So when the Clash came to the Kinema, which was in our hometown, it was a big deal. And they were touring with Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and there was no really room for us on the main stage. And Richard Hell wouldn't make any room for us, he was a bit of a dick. And, so Joe Strummer said, play on that small stage there. There's a small stage, so we got a PA put in. But the promoter made us start playing before the doors were open. So we were playing to two people were watching us, and it was Joe Strummer and Mick Jones were watching us, and that was our audience. And then the kids came in. And of course we were a cult band in the town then, so they just ran towards where we were playing. And I remember Richard Hell was watching from the side going, wait a minute, this is a problem, because we were going down extraordinarily well. And I don't think he understood what I was saying from the stage, but I went, Richard Hell, get it up, yeah. But so it was an amazing moment. And the thing about punk for me was, these people, it wasn't like sport, it wasn't competitive like that, and like music's become so corporate again and very, very competitive. Whereas the punk thing wasn't like that. So Joe was a friend, he became a friend. Steve Severin, as I said, was my flatmate for 5 years. Steve Jones, I got into more, strange situations with Steve than I care to mention. And, Cookie, all these people are still my friends to this day. So I've just written some songs with Hugh Cornwall for the new Armory Show album. So, these friendships lasted a long time, and it was based on the fact, probably I was a bit younger than a lot of them, and a bit more feral than they were, and they couldn't quite deal with this madness that would come into their lives. But, the one that I had the most fun with was definitely Steve. Steve came to see us do Masquerade on Top of the Pops, and Steve had this thing in his head that I was still a virgin. And I'd go like, fuck off, I've got women dripping off me everywhere where you look. And poor Steve was right, I was. So we were in the bar at the BBC, and I thought they were called Pants People, but in fact they were called Legs in Coal. And he said, let's go and talk to the girls. And I was quite a shy guy really, and Steve really wasn't. And Steve said, let's go and hang out with him. And we ended up back at one of their flats in Edgware Road, me and Steve. And this was like a woman, do you know what I mean? Like a grown woman, I was a kid. And I mean, I was like, oh my God, what do you do? And I didn't want to say that to Steve, because I could hear Steve in the room next door. Obviously, both of them enjoying themselves immensely. And this one was looking at me going, you don't know what to do you? And I'm like, no. And anyway, she showed me the ropes, and all I can say is, I told this story recently in the Forest of Dean, in Gloucestershire. And I told that story, and I said, the strange thing for me as a young guy who just lost his virginity to this voluptuous woman was that when I woke up in the morning, it kind of felt like you woke up next to your mum. And in the Forest of Dean, they all went, yeah.
So?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, no, but that's, so Steve taught me to drive, and he taught me how to be a lover. Yeah, so I owe a lot to him.
Well, yeah, indeed. I mean, I guess it's good to talk about Stuart. He was Stuart Adamson, Skids guitarist. He was, his guitar playing was phenomenal. You were I suppose you had a brotherly kind of relationship, but he was difficult, wasn't he? And even during the first sessions for the first album, Scared to Dance, he got the heebie-jeebies and left the sessions before they finished.
Yeah, Stuart had a lot of darkness in his life. He had a very troubled family life, which people didn't really know about until he committed suicide, and a lot of it was revealed. So, but I knew about that stuff, and knew that, and we looked after each other. He looked after me when my health wasn't good, and when he fell into a kind of dark, depressed space, then I tried to be there for him. But I was only a kid, and you're not that experienced with these things. And he found me uncontrollable, that he wanted me to be like him, come back to live in Dunfermline, get a steady girlfriend, a mortgage, a car, like everybody else. And I didn't want to do any of that. I just wanted to go out and explore life, because with my health problems, I didn't really feel I was going to be around for that long. So, we took a different route, and I think that drove him mad. But often, like for example, the one you just cited when we were recording Skids to Dance, he just vanished, and we hadn't finished the album. No one knew where he was. This was pre-mobile phones, and any way of contacting somebody directly. So it was very, very difficult. He did that kind of behaviour repeated itself until the very last gig we ever did in the UK, which was Hammersmith Odeon, as it was then called. It was a very prestigious gig, one that I'd always dreamed of playing. I'd seen Iggy there, I'd seen David Bowie there. I really wanted it to be a great night for us. And Stuart didn't turn up till 2 minutes before we went on stage that night. Didn't turn up for the sound check and stuff. So, he did cause a lot of disruption and problems with a band that was, I knew where it was coming from, but it was really difficult for the rest of us to deal with that. And it happened an awful lot. The only time it never happened was during Days in Europa, the second album, which we recorded in Wales in a place called Monmouth. I've written a little book about it, which is, if you want to grab a hold of it today, I've got it with me. Which he was much happier. It was being produced by Bill Nelson, who he loved. That's how we met. We met at a Bebop Deluxe gig. I was there to see the support band. They were called Doctors of Madness, and he was there to see Bebop Deluxe. It wasn't really my kind of thing. Bebop was a bit more rocky and guitar oriented, but he loved that. And I think Stuart was less tribal than I was. He liked different types of music. He liked Springsteen and Nils Lofgren and a bit of Zeppelin even. Whereas I was much more tribal, and I had to be within the genre of punk or nothing. And he thought it was ideal. But that makes sense if you think what he did with Big Country. It was much more of a straightforward rock band, and very commercial. But they didn't have an edge, really. The lyrics are very romantic and a bit country. Dream stay with you like a lover's voice across the mountainside. Now, I couldn't write lyrics like that at gunpoint. But he could, and they're very romantic and all that stuff. But you know, the lyrics I was writing were a little bit more abstract and I think a bit more interesting. And so I could never have done that. I would never have wanted to be in a band like Big Country. It would never have interested me, even though they were incredibly successful. And my band, The Armory Show, my second band, were not very successful at all. That doesn't bother me. I was much happier with my choice of music than that type of music. And I'm very honest about that with people, you know, who, and I understand why people like them. You know, there's got a kind of, as I say, a romantic triumphalism about it, but it just doesn't have an edge, and I like music with an edge.
Yeah, okay. So you, I mean, Stuart sacked you from the band, didn't he? So on several occasions because you'd become, perhaps in his eyes, a sort of a dandy of the London scene. So you fell in with the Blitz crowd and Boy George, and you found that very interesting.
And Boy George, no, I didn't find, no, I didn't fall into him.
You didn't fall into him? No. So I'm thinking of Diana Ross, sorry.
That was Kirk.
It was Rusty Egan, who was our drummer.
Yeah.
So Rusty was our drummer, and he was part of the thing with Steve Strait.
So you had a change of drummers, and Rusty came in. Can you talk about Rusty and his sort of influence on the band and how you got on?
Well, Rusty was he's a character. He never stops talking, and he drove us mad because he was our drummer. He made the sound of Days in Europe much more interesting and exciting. But at the same time, he never stops talking. And there's times he just wanted to shut the fuck up. You know, it would drive you mad. And he thought the whole music scene was going towards electronica, and he was kind of right, but not all right, because of course in the next wave of bands emerged things like U2, you know, who taken the influence from Adamson and taken it to another level. So that's not entirely, he wasn't entirely right in his predictions, but he did change the sound of the Skids and make us more interesting for sure with Days in Europa. And Days in Europa was a great experience. It was a great album, and Rusty did a brilliant job. Stuart was happy. It was the only time in the story of the Skids that he was ever happy. I actually recently asked people involved with Big Country, it was only the Skids that he behaved like that, and it's no, he did the same thing with them. So this was something that was deep within him. But I did drive him mad. I mean, I ended up moving to Berlin for a little period, you know, when we were working, and that's essentially the book that I'm here with today, the Kreuzberg Sonata, is about my life in Berlin, 79, 80, when the wall was maybe 100 meters from the apartment front door, and I had this amazing experience there, you know, living in a different country. But my life was about that, I think, you know, just doing different things, because of the not even concern. I think when you're young, you're fairly fearless, you're not scared of death. And I just felt I wasn't going to be around for very long, so I thought, just go for it. And I did, I really went for it. And that was part of the story, you know, going and living in a different city. But it did drive him mad, you know, he wanted me to come back and focus on life with the Skids and life in Dunfermline. And I love Dunfermline. My brothers lived there, I've got two brothers living there. But I was gone, I'd gone, and I wasn't going back, you know. So I was on a journey, and my feeling was the journey is not going to last that long, and just make the most of it. And here I am, I'm the one that's still here. Interestingly, I'll tell you a little story that happened last Friday. I was interviewed by Stuart Adamson's daughter for a documentary they're making about Stuart. And it was difficult because they wanted it to be a warts and all, very honest thing. And so she was asking the question, and I thought it's going to be difficult because it's his daughter. I'm, you know, by nature, I'm not a cruel person, you know, and I thought, this is going to be hard. And she told me that she found a lot of stuff of his in a space where he used to keep all his recordings, early recordings, and different notebooks and stuff. And she found a box of cassettes, and she was playing one, and it was Stuart, and she reminded me that Stuart used to have a cassette player, and he used to talk and record, like this conversation we're having now, he would record it. And he's talking to me at a kitchen table, and he's saying he's worried about me, because I think I've just got this really strong feeling that you're going to commit suicide because of the nature of your life and the way you are so uncontrollable and mad that, you know, you're just going to get fed up with all these other things that are going on that are difficult. that you would just call it a day. And here I am, and it's kind of him that did that, you know, and in the most macabre circumstances. You know, he hung himself in a hotel in Hawaii and was in that cupboard for 2 days, you know, before they found him. I mean, it's really shocking stuff. But yeah, I'm still here, and I think that's a big surprise to a lot of people. But then again, I think, you know, by not drinking and not taking drugs and stuff, you know, I managed to look after myself physically. But I had the same problem with my next band, with John McGeoch. You know, it was like a blueprint of this sort of thing with drink and drugs with John. I mean, I worked with two of the greatest guitar players of that post-punk generation, McGeoch and Adamson, and both of them have gone, you know, and for the same reasons, you know, alcohol and drugs.
Did you know about John McGeoch's you know, situation before he joined the band?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was Steve Severin's flatmate, so he got fired from the Banshees. So I knew everything, and Severin said to me, "This is going to be really, really difficult, you know, because John's uncontrollable." And I thought, nah, no problem, I can control him. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. I mean,